Seahawks players have a lot to prove this year. Sam Darnold needs to prove that last season wasn't a fluke. Jaxon Smith-Njigba gets his shot to be an elite wide receiver one, and Kenneth Walker needs to show he can stay healthy. We discuss the top 3 storylines for the Seattle Seahawks entering 2025 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Today, we are getting into all things Seattle Seahawks as we enter this season. And it's going to look like a brand new offense this year because they switched out Geno Smith for Sam Darnold. They let go of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and brought in Cooper Kupp. So it's Jaxon Smith-Njigba as, the wide receiver one on this team. And does Cooper Kupp have anything left? And then, of course, this backfield that always just seems to be so hard to stay healthy. I mean, I can't, it's just like every year the Seahawks have a problem with their running back staying healthy. But can Kenneth Walker finally break out as this top tier fantasy running back in the league? Or is it going to be a split backfield between Walker and Zach Charbonnet? These are all things we'll discuss today. Let's start with Sam Darnold because the success of this offense is going to come down to what Sam Darnold do we get, right? Can we get even close to the Sam Darnold that we got last year with the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell's offense when he was the quarterback 9 in fantasy? Or are we going to get the old Sam Darnold where it was just absolutely atrocious and nobody could be good in fantasy playing with him? Where do you stand on that, Vinny? Or do you think it's somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, with Sam Darnold, it's hard, right? I mean, he's ranked all the way down there to QB 27. So no one that has any expectation, despite what he did last year. And it's a completely different situation. He's not in Minnesota. He doesn't have Justin Jefferson. He doesn't have Kevin O'Connell. He had some familiarity with that system from the crossover with the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan. So there was things there that lined up, right? Now we're worried because we look at this offense. I mean, no, it was a lot different with the Geno Smith last year in the Ryan Grubb offense. He had that breakout season before, and then he plummeted all the way to QB 17. If you want to look at where Clint Kubiak was in New Orleans, we saw Derek Carr start off as gangbusters. I'm like, oh, is he here as a QB1? Then he got hurt at one point. Now he's retired. But during last season, he was the QB 23 on average in that offense. So we know the Saints had a lot of other issues, right? A lot of people were going down left and right with Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed and Marquez Valdes-Scantling go down for that team. So there was not much left. It was a shell of an offense where Alvin Kamara basically was the central point of that whole entire attack, which wasn't very good. Now you go to Seattle where I think Kubiak is going to be more excited about what he has to work with. But again, we've seen Darnold in every other situation not work out. So he had the ideal, perfect situation for him last year, and then he delivered. But he was not like he lit it up to the point where he was a top 5 QB matching like a Baker Mayfield or Joe Burrow. He was very good, but do we want a piece of him now? It's hard to say that, right? Because you talked about it's a big difference here. It's not DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. By the way, who had great chemistry with Geno Smith. I don't think we can discount that. Like, that's a little bit of a difference here. Does Darnold get on the same page with him enough? And they have Cooper Kupp. Now, there's a little bit of crossover, right? They've both been in like McVay, O'Connell type systems, so that could definitely help them connect pretty well. But again, you just have to continue to be skeptical about these guys that pop up because it happened with Geno Smith. We saw it happen with Daniel Jones. He put up a big year. But the history of this entire career says he's not going to give you the fantasy numbers that you're looking for because, again, when he starts, he hasn't been all that good. So I think you have to look at the bigger body of work, not just last year. You have to incorporate all the changes and say, look, I don't know if I even want to target him as a sleeper. We talked about like a Matthew Stafford. We liked him maybe as a QB2. We liked Brock Purdy there as a safe pick in this division as a QB1. But somewhere in between, Sam Darnold just does not appeal to me at all.
No, I mean, he threw 35 touchdowns last year. And yeah, he finished as a quarterback 9 on average with 18 points per game. But it's like, I don't think he's going to get close to 35 touchdowns again. And that's like kind of his max ceiling. And if your max ceiling is 18 points, and we know what your floor is, because I mean, he's never thrown more than 19 touchdowns in a season prior to 2024. He doesn't really offer all too much on the ground. He can, like, in that weird 2021 season, we saw him keep running for touchdowns to start his Panthers career. But he's never had more than 222 rushing yards in a season. Last year, playing a full season, he only had 212 rushing yards. So it's not like he offers a ton there. And his weapons are just getting so much worse. I like Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and maybe Cooper Kupp can have another year in him if he can stay healthy. But that's very, very different than having the best wide receiver in the league in Justin Jefferson, a great wide receiver too in Jordan Addison. And then he had TJ Hawkinson for the second half of the year as well, where Noah Fant is not even close to Hawkinson, even coming off of injury. So that's a worry. And then also something I want to point out is that Sam Darnold got a lot of points coming off of Vikings defensive turnovers that just put him into a perfect spot to score quickly. Yeah. 7 of Sam Darnold's touchdowns last year, passing touchdowns, came after the Vikings got a defensive turnover. That was the most in the NFL among all quarterbacks, or just most in the NFL, I guess. That's hard to depend on the Seahawks having one of those type of defensive years where they're just always putting Darnold into fantastic spots. So thinking about the change of quarterbacks, change of team, change of weapons, and the likelihood that his points probably would have went down even with the Vikings, I think all those things say I'm not interested in him in fantasy. However, he is scoring as quarterback 27. So there really is no risk of taking him. It's not like it seems like everyone's kind of on the same page here that we expect Sam Darnold to turn back into who he was. So, if you really like him and you believe in him and you want to take a shot at him, he is going so incredibly late that there is really no risk.
Yeah, let me put in this perspective from my personal team from last year and in the league that Michelle and I played. I had Jalen Hurts, and he was my no-brainer right guy that I plugged and played every week. But then the second quarterback, like I had J.J. McCarthy, and I had Sam Darnold, and I was fine. I drafted Sam Darnold there, knowing that if McCarthy was hurt, the system was good enough where I was going to get the production from Darnold. The funny thing is I also had Geno Smith, who Darnold was replacing. I didn't hardly play Geno Smith last year in Seattle. Whose system am I going to play more into this year? I think it's Geno Smith back with the Chip Kelly type of offense that he's familiar with from the spread. Then Sam Darnold in this particular situation with Clint Kubiak. I know they have a little bit of crossover as well from the 49ers, but when I look at Smith, I mean, just the weapons already look better, right? Even though you have Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers, I mean, that still gives me a little bit more reliability. So when I look at Sam, again, I followed him for the system last year in Minnesota, and I could trust him. This year, it's a new system, new team, new receivers. I don't want to start over again after he kind of hit his career spike and ceiling. So it can only go down from here. It's just that I don't want him even as an option for me to explore, right? And 2 QB league, super flex, streaming, he just doesn't appeal to me because there's not going to be many weeks where I'm really wanting and feeling good about playing him.
Yeah, and I think the end of last year really just put a bad taste in everyone's mouth, right? He became exactly the Sam Darnold we've always known. And week 18, the biggest game of their season to be the number 1 seed, and they fall apart. And then in the wild card round, he showed exactly who he was. So I do think it was a fluke of a season. But again, if you don't, and you have strong feelings and a gut feeling that he has turned the corner and he's going to be, a top 10 quarterback, then take him at quarterback 27. I mean, there really is not much risk there, but I would not go into the season with just him as my quarterback 1. That's for sure. Now we have to figure out, is Sam Darnold going to be able to support Jaxon Smith-Njigba to be an elite wide receiver 1? I mean, he did it for Justin Jefferson last year. Jordan Addison also had a really solid fantasy season. So he did it last year, but can he do it this year with JSN and Cooper Kupp? We will discuss right after a quick break.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by Monarch Money. And you can go look at your bank account and you could wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth for the future. Really, you look at Monarch Money, they're going to give you some surprising insights. You can see how much you spend on food delivery and things that just add up sneakily for you and really crimp your budget here. And it's so convenient. Instead of using multiple apps to do your finances and budget and track spending, you have it all there with Monarch Money, and it's easy to share it if you've got a partner and you've got to look at the accounts and what's going on and who's spending what. You can look at that as well with Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first order. That's Monarch Money. That's MONARCH, monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL, and you will save half off on your first year using it. I recommend it, monarchmoney.com. All right, Michelle, it is time to talk about the Seahawks' probably best fantasy asset overall, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Interesting season last year. He was the wide receiver 10 overall in half-point PPR, but he was wide receiver 22 in average scoring. So his durability was a big part of why he was very good in fantasy, that you could count on him in a lot of weeks. But when you look at the scoring, not as high as expected. But now, goodbye, DK Metcalf. Goodbye, Tyler Lockett. Enter Cooper Kupp. And Marcus Valdes-Scantling. We can't totally forget about him. He's on this team. He follows Clint Kubiak from New Orleans. So when you look at this, you had a lot of vacated targets. So 191 vacated targets for the Seahawks. A lot of them, of course, Metcalf and Lockett. 178 wide receiver. So then you look at the combination last year, they didn't really have receivers at one point in New Orleans. So you don't really have a blueprint there. Kubiak, Chris Olave, and Rashid Shaheed just weren't healthy. You didn't get even 10 games from any of these guys, including MVS. So really no receiving core to speak of there in New Orleans. And now you have Seattle. Look, we're trying to piece it back together after JSN with Cooper Kupp. So how do you like JSN this year? He had 137 targets last year. There was plenty of targets available to go around between him and Cooper Kupp. I'm really feeling JSN this year. He's a guy that I really want to get. He's wide receiver 12. Do you think you want to bang the table for him as well? And maybe he's still being undervalued as the last wide receiver one on the board.
Yeah, I'll say wide receiver 12. I do think it's fair. Maybe a couple spots up, but when you look at the wide receiver 22 on average, that couldn't scare you off a little bit. But I will say the second half of the year was very different than the first half, right? The first half of the year, he was averaging just from weeks 1 through 8, averaging 8.5 points per game, only 48 receiving yards per game and 1 touchdown, and only 9 yards per reception. That was really the biggest issue because his targets didn't increase or decrease from one half to the other. It was like his usage and how they were using him change. Now he'll still have a different offensive coordinator, so maybe it won't be, but I would expect Clint Kubiak to use him, not so short and more of that intermediate wide receiver, because weeks 9 through 18, he averaged 15 points per game, 82 receiving yards per game, and had 5 touchdowns during that span. So I do think he's worth his cost right now. And at 137 targets last year, you mentioned all the vacated targets. I think he has plenty of the skill set to be that possession receiver that gets 160, 170 targets, maybe even. So I do think he'll be a volume receiver. It's going to come down to the touchdowns. How are they scoring with Sam Darnold back there? Because he only had 6 last year. You'd like that to get to 8 to 10 if you're taking him that early. But when you're looking at who's going around him, I like with Ladd McConkey going right before him and Drake London, I think they're also just as risky as JSN, or more risky, with JSN being much safer with the same ceiling. And then right afterwards is T. Higgins and the Mike Evans that will have the target competition. Maybe who would you rather go with? Because you love Terry McLaurin or JSN?
Yeah, I mean, now Terry McLaurin does have significant competition. I mean, Deebo Samuel's in there. With JSN, I don't think Cooper Kupp is going to be as big of a factor as we think. And if Kupp was the wide receiver 23 on average, but he hardly stayed healthy for the Rams last year. And I don't know what you're going to get. I think Kupp is a fading player while JSN is a ascending player. Now, the player I really like to compare him to is not just because they have hyphenated names and they're fun, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, I think he's very much like Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah.
And what happened with him? He also had the touchdowns come. He also had more work outside of possession slot. He started to be on the outside in higher leverage situations and get trusted by a quarterback. And with Sam Darnold, the one thing about Sam Darnold being a quote limited to quarterback, he's going to feed one dude quite a bit. And I think what helps is also Jordan Addison was a similar type receiver that got open for him quite a bit last year in Minnesota. So he's going to really use JSN as a security blanket, that guy that can get open all over the field. Like Cooper Kupp, again, he's just going to slow down. We saw it last year. He's just older. And Jaxon Smith-Njigba has plenty of energy. He's a young receiver on the rise. But, I mean, I just look at that cost at wide receiver 12. I would expect him to finish inside the top 10. That's how excited I am about JSN. The talent is there. And I think people forget he was the first wide receiver drafted in his class because that's how good he was at Ohio State. And we've talked about Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr. He was the Mr. Reliable in Ohio State for a long time. And we're seeing that production kind of manifest itself now fully healthy and immersed in an offense. I think this is going to take even more advantage of the skill set did last season.
Now with Cooper Kupp, he's sitting at wide receiver 47 right now. And we might want to say, yeah, we're over Cooper Kupp and he's boring and he can't stay healthy, blah, blah, blah. But he finished as the wide receiver 23 on average last year with his final season with the Rams. He averaged nearly just as much as JSN last year. JSN averaged 11.9 points per game. Cooper Kupp was at 11.8. And honestly, if you take out the game where he got injured, Cooper Kupp, where he got injured in the first half, in the other 11 games he played, he averaged 12.4 points per game. He was actually like a really, really good fantasy weapon until those last 3 games of the season, which happened to be the fantasy playoffs, and he just completely disappeared. I don't really know what happened. So we saw him get hurt in week 2, right? And he doesn't come back till week 8. But from weeks 8 through 14, he averaged 9 targets per game, 14.8 fantasy points per game. And then all of a sudden, in weeks 15 through 17, he gets 3 targets only in each of those games, does pretty much absolutely nothing, has 4 total receptions. They didn't mention an injury, like he wasn't on the injury report. I don't know what happened there, but I'm not ready to say Cooper Kupp is completely done because we saw Adam Thielen, go to the Panthers and we thought his career was over, but changed the teams and he got the targets and it worked out. Cooper Kupp at wide receiver 47 does seem like a pretty solid value if you just need like a wide receiver 3 type to throw in that has a good shot to come through with those numbers.
Yeah, I think the one problem with Kupp is the very similar skill set in Jaxon Smith-Njigba, where he can get open, work inside. He's a good possession receiver. So Darnold's going to have to really commit to one of these guys. But then again, there's not a lot in that way, right? We don't have that reliable tight end like the TJ Hawkinson. We don't have any other consistent receivers. I mean, MVS is the number 3, and he's the deep threat, right? He's not going to line up and run routes and use his hands to get open consistently. He's just a guy that they're going to take a few shots with. It's been his entire career. So that does help Cooper Kupp. So I think, 47, it just seems like he's free at this point. Like he's a free wide receiver 3, and I think you just can't throw him away. I think this is way too low for him. So especially given the situation, especially given that they don't have a lot of dudes and they need to fill a lot of wide receiver targets from last year. So again, I think Kupp can easily finish in the top 36, just like I think we have a top 10 receiver JSN. So do we think this is going to mean more for Sam Darnold? No, because I don't know if the touchdowns, that's what we're going to look for, right? The touchdowns might be limited overall with these 2 guys with not a lot of other touchdown scorers at the position. And again, pocket passers are really hard to get that duplicate number. And even with these guys, I don't think it happens for Darnold.
And one last thing I want to say about this wide receiver group, keep an eye on Ricky Torrey Horton over training camp. And most likely not a guy we're going to consider drafting in redraft leagues. Right now, he's going well undrafted in very, very far down there. So he's like in the wide receiver 100s, but he was a 5th round pick this year. I thought he might go in the 4th round, but the only reason he fell that far is because he was injured all season long in 2024. And from 2022 to 2023, he was averaging 95 receiving yards per game. That was ranked 4th in the FBS during that span, behind only Roma Dunze, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Malik Neighbors, who all went top 10 in the league. He has good size, a really good route runner. He's 6'2", 192 pounds. He ran a 4.41 at the combine, 38-inch for 37 and a half. And he injured that knee in late November, so maybe teams were scared off of that. But again, if he can put up those numbers at the combine and not be scared to re-injure it, I think this is a guy to look out for. And maybe it doesn't happen until midseason, or maybe Cooper Kupp gets injured and he gets a chance. But just keep an eye on the news around him, because I will definitely be doing that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how this shakes out. I mean, it's a good reboot, right? We got a little stale with the Metcalf, Lockett, Smith type transition from Russell Wilson. So it'll be interesting to see. But again, these receivers have to be funneled a lot of the targets, because, again, there isn't much choice if Sam Darnold wants to be successful in reality for his new team this season.
Now, there's still a big question left that we haven't answered yet. And is Kenneth Walker worth that running back 16 cost, or is that too low for him, honestly? Or do you just wait it around and take Zach Charbonnet and go with that option in the backfield? We will discuss to end today's show. I want to thank everyone for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, let's dig into this backfield for the Seahawks. Right now, Kenneth Walker is ranked as the running back 16. Zach Charbonnet is the running back 36. Walker last season was running back 15 in points per game, running back 20 on average in 2023, running back 15 on average in 2022. So it has been pretty consistent for him, although last year was a nice step up in points per game, because in 2022 and 2023, it was nearly identical, 12.3, 12.6. This last season, it was 14.4. There's some reasons I have optimism about Kenneth Walker, but he does seem to just struggle to stay healthy for a full season.
Yeah, this is one of the hardest players to have on fantasy rosters, because it's not just the health that he's going to probably miss games. It's the sweating it out until the last minute. Like, it's an oblique, it's a hamstring, it's a shoulder, something we're worried about. Oh, we got to check the injury report, because the Seahawks with their injury reports are so confusing. Then they'll get questionable, and then all of a sudden he's playing. And then the one thing with him is you have to get Charbonnet pretty high. Like, I'm not sure that they want to make this a full-blown committee, because Walker is special. He does have some ability to finish in bunches. We've seen him have several multiple touchdown games. He's a very good runner, and he's a capable receiver. I don't think they necessarily see this as an interchangeable backfield. I mean, I could see their skill sets being interchangeable, but that was very frustrating. If you had Zach Charbonnet, like, you had to have Walker be hurt, then Charbonnet would go off. He'd have these monster games that times couldn't even reach. But then when Walker came back, Charbonnet went back to being limited. Now, that's a different play caller, different philosophy could be happening. But we also have Kubiak, who basically didn't try to mess with other backs. I don't think he had a lot of options other than Alvin Kamara last year, and Kamara was the RB6 in average scoring last year. So, look, there is definitely a ceiling with Walker, but I think his durability is going to keep him from getting it. And that's a tough thing. Like, can you guarantee you're going to get Charbonnet later in the draft if you draft Walker early? No, because somebody might think the same thing. Walker gets hurt a lot. I want to jump on Charbonnet and go get it. So, again, I like the idea of Kenneth Walker. Like, he could be really special. But I think it's what you see is what you get. We've seen this for a few years now. We've seen what Charbonnet can do. They don't completely trust Charbonnet as a full feature back. They do like Walker, but they know he's going to miss games. So I think this is what you have from this backfield. So just read it the way it is. Don't overdraft Walker. Don't underdraft Walker. And make sure you get a little aggressive if you're going to go after Charbonnet.
Yeah, it is interesting with Clint Kubiak here, right? Because Kamara, he always gets a ton of targets, but got a ton of targets again last year with Kubiak and was a top fantasy player. In 2023, he was with the 49ers as a passing game coordinator, CMC, a monster in targets. And when last year, Walker actually had a career high in targets at 53, despite only playing 11 games. Like 53 targets in 11 games is a lot for any running back, but especially for a guy like Kenneth Walker. And then Sam Darnold's not opposed to throwing to running backs. We saw Aaron Jones last year, even, not playing a ton of snaps, but he still got over 400 receiving yards last year, 51 receptions. So Sam Darnold's happy to check it down to the running backs. And the reason why I think Walker is worth the risk is that when he is healthy and he does get the workload, he is so good. So last year, again, like I said, he played 11 games, but there's 3 games where he got very limited workload. All I'm asking is for 10. I'm looking at the games where he had 10 plus carries, and there was 8 games last year at 10 plus carries out of the 11 he played. He averaged 16.4 points per game in those games in half PPR. That puts him at running back 7. That would have put him at running back 7 in points per game, behind only Barkley, Gibbs, Derrick Henry, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, and Alvin Kamara. So I do actually have high hopes for Kenneth Walker, but he is just a serious injury risk. And like you said, it's not about always missing games. It's about waiting till the last second to see if he's going to be active, and then holding your breath that he's going to get the workload, because sometimes he's active but has a limited workload because of the injuries. So there are concerns, but he is going after guys like Breece Hall and Joe Mixon. I would rather have Kenneth Walker than those 2 guys.
Yeah, look, this is a clear situation where you need to be aggressive to get your handcuff. If you're Walker, you got to do it, because you want someone else to benefit from if Walker goes down? Absolutely not. You should be the top beneficiary of that. So I just look at it. Look, if you can do that, you just have to be ready to pounce on Charbonnet early, because, again, that's basically what it happened here, right? Where it was seamless. You put in Walker, you got hurt, you put in Charbonnet, went back to Walker as soon as Charbonnet was cast off as the bench guy, and Walker was back healthy. I mean, it's pretty clear cut here. Offensive philosophy and the different play caller could change things. Watch for that, right? If there's some reports about they're not so hot in Charbonnet, they don't like maybe some aspect of his game as much, or maybe they want to keep Walker healthy, right, and limit his touches and make this more of a split backfield. So these are things we do have to pay attention to as we get the reps and the reporting from a training camp to see if that part has changed. But I think the evidence is there is what type of backs both of these guys are. One's not quite ready to explode and have a full workload, Charbonnet, but he's really good in a pinch if he has to see expanded touches, and Walker's really good and borderline great here when he's on the field. So that's a good thing. I think for some unknown with his backfield, you do actually have a lot of things we can expect. So that's always good.
Yeah, and when I'm with you that if you take Kenneth Walker, you probably want to just bite the bullet and take Charbonnet later as well, because Charbonnet in the 6 starts, he started all 6 games that Walker missed last year. He averaged 17.6 points per game. That was 6 among running backs and starts last year. The only running backs and starts last year that averaged more than Charbonnet were Gibbs, Barkley, Henry, Robinson, and Bucky Irving. So you plug him right in, you feel good about it. And where you have to take him, I mean, you're missing out on a guy like Cooper Kupp or Josh Downs or Travis Etienne, Michael Pittman Jr., but that's where he's going around. I'm okay missing out on one of those guys to have a sure set thing in my running back spot, whether it's Kenneth Walker when he's healthy or Zach Charbonnet when not. I think that's a fine way to go if that's the route you want to take. But that will be it for today's show. We will be back next week on Monday. Again, we're only doing 3 shows a week for the month of June. We'll be back to 5 days a week in July. I hope you all have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. Bye, y'all.